Let's turn this into this. If I told you what you just heard was only 2 chords, you'd probably be thinking, stop capping. But all we are doing is going from the 4 to the 5 in a minor 4/5 progression. And I'm going to take you through all the steps to take those 2 boring chords to the next level. So we start with the basic D minor triad, which is just D, F and A, 3-note chord. Sounds like that. And when you add the C note in, it becomes a D minor 7th because the C is the minor 7th interval. Already sounds like a nice chord. We're using that 1 note. You add an E on top and you have a D minor 9 chord. And you can move these notes anywhere around to create different colors and see what works for you. The second chord is an E minor triad. If you listen to just the E minor triad, flowing in from the D minor 9. It's okay, we can make it more interesting. Again, we can add a minor 7th. We can add the F sharp and that makes it an E minor 9. So if we were doing a normal 4/5 progression, the second chord in the progression would be an E minor chord, but we're not going to play an E minor chord. What works really nicely is substituting the minor chord for a dominant chord, and we can do that because essentially it becomes the 5 chord that wants to go back to the root chord, which is the A minor chord. So it's like a 5 in a 5/1. In its most basic form, the dominant chord is just the root, the major 3rd, and the dominant 7th. Already it sounds really cool because there's tension there, and tension works super well for music in general because there has to be some tension and there has to be some release somewhere. To ramp that up even more, we can add what is known as a sharp 9 or a flat 9. It may sound complicated, but all we're doing is we're taking the 2 in E, which is an F sharp. We are raising it up an octave. It then becomes the 9. And if we move that up 1 note, it's a sharp 9. Or down 1 note, it is a flat 9. Listen to how the sharp 9 sounds against that D minor 9 chord. Beautiful. And we can make that a flat 9, or we can even change it to a flat 9 halfway through the progression. See how that works really nicely? We call that voice leading because the notes just come down and it's almost like a melody on its own. I use this all the time. This substitution of a minor 5 chord for a dominant 5 chord, and you'll hear it tons in R&B. So my boy Evil put me onto something called Multikeys. You can use different synths for this, but I used Pigments. So I took 5 one-shots from Coop the Truth's one-shot pack. I used sample mode, and then I turned on the round robin feature, which meant that every time I played a different note, a different sample would trigger. I made sure that all the samples were on the same note, otherwise it would have just sounded like mess. And all the samples that I chose were on the note C. And this is important to remember. If you're going to try something using a Multikeys, and I know you can do this in Analog Labs and a couple of other samplers as well, then make sure that your samples are in key. So guys, if you're enjoying today's breakdown, please go and follow me on Instagram. My handle is here. I really appreciate it. Cop some of my free mini kits. I've got loads more kits coming soon, and sign up to my mailing list. And my samples are all stemmed out with bass MIDI, so, you know, really easy to use. And I played the chords in such a way that I played them quite broken and choppy, and you can hear that here. Nothing too much on there. Some chorus to spread the sound a little bit. I wanted to try and keep this quite vintage in my processing. A little RC20. Some EQ, just giving it some space in the mix, and a little bit of decimal where I am changing the sample rate to again degrade the signal a little bit. I really wanted it to feel vintage and a little mysterious as well. To contrast with this very choppy sound, I added very low in the mix, Frank Dukes' synth, The Prince, on the Colourful Lily preset, and I played longer versions of the chords that I was playing choppily on the other sound. My processing was quite similar. I used the Microshift again. I love this plugin. It's just, to me, sounds like a really analog style chorus. I used the Neutron biphase from Arturia. You've probably seen me using Logic's stock phaser, but I do love this phaser as well. It maybe sounds a little richer. I love the Goodhertz plugins, use wow control on this, and it's just an alternative to RC20 really, giving the kind of lo-fi texture to the sound. And then again, I EQ'd this sound. I knew that I wanted one sprinkly ear candy sound, and what I sometimes do is program them slowly and then time stretch them. QAPT makes some amazing presets, and I use one of their presets for this sound. I use my favorite bass, which I know Take a Day Trip and several other top industry producers love, the Moog Growler sound, which is in Omnisphere and just sounds amazing, cuts through. It's that kind of sawtooth Drake bass that you've heard on so many tunes. I EQ'd a lot of tops out of this, just wanted the real low end there. And something that I really like to do on bass sounds is did some multiband compression, which is pretty much just a dynamic EQ, so that around about 250 Hertz, every time it crosses the threshold, the sound ducks a little bit. I drew for a little vocal, which brought in from Monty Booker's kit, and a couple of Foley sounds. Percussion wise, I programmed in a little mouth pop sound that is a groove that plays throughout. I added my favourite reverb, the Arturia Rev Spring, and some shaper box panning the sound from right to left. If you've seen my video with Reggie, shout out Reggie, goated producer, I used some talking that I just put really low in the mix to add an ambient sound and texture to the sample, and that is pretty much it for the A section. For the switch up part, I wanted to really invoke that feeling of 90s R&B, almost like I just ripped a Tevin Campbell or a Keith Sweat record, but also gave it kind of a modern twist as well. So for the first sound in this switch up section, I went into Omnisphere and I chose the LA Custom Rhodes, just a beautiful sounding electric piano. Because the A section, the sounds were so synthetic and synthesized, I wanted to use more real sounds here and really invoke that 90s R&B feel. I played out the same two chords and just changed the melody a little bit and the way that I was playing it from how I did in the A section, but really it's just those same two chords with a couple of little embellishment melodies on the top. Went for my contact bass and I played out a bass line almost like how a real bass player would play. So some pentatonic fills and some root notes, nothing too exciting, just kept it quite simple. I did decide to emphasize a rhythm like dum-dum. I get these lines in my head and I sing them a lot, and I find that that really helps me to just then play whatever I can sing on the keyboard. I wanted like a filtered 90s R&B beat, so I programmed in these simple drums and then just filtered it down and added a bit of reverb, push it back in the mix. I grabbed the soulful vocal from Splice. I do use Splice sometimes. I try not to overuse it, but I grabbed it. I knew I was going to effect this vocal so you wouldn't really be able to hear what was going on. It was more going to be like an ambience in the background. And I put an auto filter on there, the same phaser that I've been using for the whole sample, and some decapitator to really distort it, and so you really couldn't make out what was being said. The last thing I added was I pieced together a lead synth sound from a couple of different loops in the Apple loops. Could have played this in, but I just decided I would be lazy for once and just drew for that. And I think it sounds really nice in the mix, quite low. I wanted this bit to almost feel like the outro of an R&B song that was just tacked onto the end of the other song. So guys, if you want to know a little bit more about chord theory and you enjoyed today and also some processing source, check out this video.